La mañana del 23 de septiembre de 2025 amaneció sobre el mar de la China Meridional, con una tranquilidad engañosa. El sol ascendía en un cielo brumoso y húmedo, dibujando un sendero reluciente sobre las aguas profundas y azules. Para la tripulación del petrolero estadounidense, el Británico era simplemente otro día en un viaje largo y familiar. El suave zumbido de los potentes motores del buque era una presencia constante y tranquilizadora, el único sonido que rompía el inmenso silencio del océano abierto. En el puente, los oficiales vigilaban el rumbo, con conversaciones ligeras y rutinarias. El destino era Puerto Princesa, en Filipinas, un puerto amistoso, a menos de 310 millas náuticas de distancia. El mar parecía extenderse en una interminable y pacífica llanura, una imagen del comercio global fluyendo sin obstáculos. Sin embargo, esta vista serena era solo una ilusión frágil. El mar de la China Meridional, a pesar de su belleza natural, había sido durante mucho tiempo un escenario de tensiones geopolíticas latentes. Una arteria crítica para un tercio del comercio marítimo mundial, sus aguas eran disputadas, sus islas fortificadas y sus profundidades patrulladas por las armadas de superpotencias rivales. Él no era solo un buque comercial. Era un navío con bandera estadounidense que transportaba una carga preciosa de 550.000 barriles de crudo. Su travesía, por lo tanto, era toda una declaración, una afirmación silenciosa de la libertad de navegación en aguas internacionales. Escoltándolo, iba un guardián silencioso, el poderoso USS, un destructor lanzamisiles, cuya silueta gris y elegante avanzaba con determinación a unos pocos miles de yardas de distancia. El ambiente a bordo de ambos barcos estadounidenses era de calma profesional, un estado conocido como condición cuarto, es decir, navegación en tiempos de paz. Los 27 tripulantes del cumplían con sus tareas, desde revisiones en la sala de máquinas hasta la preparación en la cocina, pensando en llegar a puerto y el breve descanso que eso les ofrecería. A bordo del USS, su dotación de 370 marineros e infantes de marina mantenía un nivel similar de relajada preparación. Los sensores avanzados del buque estaban activos, barriendo el mar y el cielo, pero todo parecía normal. No había indicios de amenaza inmediata, ni señal de que esa mañana común de martes estaba a punto de convertirse en un torbellino de fuego y acero que pondría a dos potencias nucleares al borde del abismo. El valor de la carga a bordo del era inmenso, no solo en términos monetarios, unos 42.000 millones de dólares en crudo, sino por su importancia estratégica para las fuerzas estadounidenses en la región. No era solo combustible, era el alma de las operaciones militares, destinado al puerto de aguas profundas en Puerto Princesa. Así que la misión era rutinaria, pero vital. La presencia del USS, un formidable destructor clase Harrisburg, valorado en 2.000 millones de dólares, subrayaba la importancia que Estados Unidos otorgaba a esta entrega. El barco y su tripulación eran la máxima póliza de seguro, una señal clara de que los activos estadounidenses en esta volátil región estaban protegidos por todo el poder de la Marina de los Estados Unidos. La calma no era casualidad, era un estado mantenido por la fuerza. La primera señal de que el día no seguiría según lo planeado llegó a las 8:40, hora local. En lo profundo del centro de información de combate del USS, un operador de radar detectó un nuevo contacto. Un punto apareció en la pantalla, acercándose desde el este a gran velocidad. Pronto se identificó como la inconfundible silueta de un buque de guerra chino. El buque fue identificado como un destructor tipo 052D, uno de los más avanzados y capaces de la Armada del Ejército Popular de Liberación. El barco chino no respondió a los llamados estándar, manteniendo un deliberado y perturbador silencio radial. Se posicionó en un rumbo paralelo, siguiendo al convoy estadounidense a distancia, como un depredador gris acechando a su presa en mar abierto. Una tensión palpable comenzó a reemplazar la atmósfera relajada de la mañana a bordo del USS. El capitán del barco, un comandante experimentado, ordenó elevar el nivel de alerta. El llamado a condición 13, es decir, navegación en tiempos de guerra, resonó por los pasillos del buque. marineros e infantes de marina se dirigieron con rapidez y disciplina a sus puestos de combate. En el puente, los oficiales ahora observaban al destructor chino con binoculares. Su moderna y angular superestructura era una visión amenazante en el horizonte. El silencio del otro buque resultaba profundamente inquietante. En la compleja danza no verbal del postureo naval, negarse a comunicar es, muchas veces, la señal más ruidosa y agresiva que se puede enviar. Era una escalada clara e intencional. El destructor chino era un oponente formidable. Conocido por la OTAN como clase Luyang III, el tipo 052D está equipado con sofisticados radares de matriz en fase, similares al sistema Aegis estadounidense, y un arsenal letal de misiles antiaéreos y antibuque. Su presencia transformó por completo el cálculo estratégico de la mañana. Ya no era una simple misión de escolta, era una confrontación directa y hostil. El capitán comprendía la gravedad de la situación. No solo era responsable de su buque de $2.000 millones y sus 370 tripulantes, sino también del vulnerable y lento petrolero y su tripulación civil. El mar tranquilo se había convertido en un tablero de ajedrez, y una pieza peligrosa acababa de entrar en juego. Durante otra hora, el tenso enfrentamiento continuó. Los dos destructores navegaban en paralelo, en un duelo silencioso de voluntades a lo largo de varias millas de océano. La tripulación estadounidense permanecía en máxima alerta, dejando que su entrenamiento tomara el control mientras se preparaban para lo peor. Cada sensor del USS se enfocaba en el buque chino, buscando cualquier señal de intención hostil. La apertura de silos de misiles, la activación de radares de control de tiro. A las 9:15, con el destructor chino sin mostrar señales de modificar su postura agresiva, el capitán declaró el estado de emergencia y transmitió la situación al mando del Pacífico. La calma se había roto de manera irreversible. Ahora la única pregunta era, no si, sino cuándo llegaría el ataque. A las 9:45 en punto, llegó el momento de la verdad. Los sensores a bordo del USS lanzaron una alerta ensordecedora. Varias compuertas se abrieron de golpe a lo largo de la cubierta del destructor chino tipo 052D. Un instante después, una lluvia de fuego y humo brotó de sus celdas de lanzamiento vertical. 12 misiles supersónicos antibuque, los temidos IJ-12, se elevaron hacia el cielo. Ascendieron de forma pronunciada antes de nivelarse, acelerando a una velocidad aterradora en dirección a su objetivo, El costo de esta sola andanada superaba los $80 millones, una clara señal de la seriedad de la intención china. Cada misil, viajando a casi 3 veces la velocidad del sonido, llevaba una ojiva de 450 kilogramos, diseñada para incapacitar o hundir incluso a los buques más grandes. El ataque había comenzado. El centro de información de combate del USS se transformó en un remolino de caos controlado. Misiles en el aire, misiles en el aire. La alerta resonaba por los sistemas de comunicación del buque. El sistema de combate Aegis, el corazón tecnológico del destructor, entró en acción. Era una maravilla de la ingeniería moderna, diseñada precisamente para este tipo de escenarios. El potente radar SPI-1 del sistema Aegis fijó los blancos, siguiendo a la docena de IJ-12 que rozaban el mar, cerrando la distancia en cuestión de segundos. Los algoritmos calcularon soluciones de tiro a una velocidad vertiginosa. El comandante del barco dio la orden de abrir fuego, su voz firme pese a la enorme presión. El destino de cientos de vidas y un activo multimillonario dependía del desempeño de su tripulación y sistemas en los próximos instantes. El USS desató su propia furia defensiva. Una serie de misiles interceptores SM-2 salieron disparados de los lanzadores del buque, surcando el cielo para enfrentarse a la amenaza. El espacio entre los barcos se convirtió en un lienzo letal de explosiones y estelas. El sistema Aegis funcionó de manera magnífica, un verdadero testimonio de su diseño y del riguroso entrenamiento de la tripulación. 10 de los 12 misiles IJ-12 fueron interceptados con éxito, destruidos en pleno vuelo por los defensores estadounidenses. Pero el IJ-12 es un objetivo notoriamente difícil. Supersónico y ágil, está diseñado para superar incluso las defensas más avanzadas. En este juego de números tan arriesgado, 2 de los misiles lograron atravesar la pantalla defensiva. Los 2 proyectiles finales se abalanzaron sobre el pesado. El primero impactó el casco de estribor del Petrolero, abriendo un enorme boquete en las gruesas planchas de acero. El segundo encontró un blanco aún más catastrófico, uno de los enormes tanques de combustible repletos de crudo. El impacto fue apocalíptico. Una bola de fuego monumental, de 120 metros de altura, estalló en la cubierta del Petrolero, una esfera naranja brillante contra el cielo azul. Una onda expansiva sacudió las aguas cercanas y estremeció al USS. Una gruesa columna de humo negro comenzó a ascender hacia la atmósfera, una pira funeraria visible a casi 100 kilómetros de distancia. En la cubierta del Petrolero averiado, 3 marineros estadounidenses murieron al instante y otros 12 sufrieron heridas graves. Él quedó a la deriva, su valiosa carga alimentando un incendio incontrolable. In the immediate aftermath of the successful strike, a wave of triumphalism swept through certain circles in Beijing. The news, carefully managed and disseminated through state-controlled media, was framed as a monumental victory. It was a demonstration of the People's Liberation Army Navy's growing power and resolve. For years, Chinese propaganda had promised that the nation's military could and would challenge American dominance in the region. The burning hulk of the Liberty Sentinel was presented as visceral proof of that claim. The message was simple and powerful. American steel could bleed. The South China Sea was not an American lake, and China was now the master of its own near seas. This carefully curated narrative was broadcast across the country and the world. News anchors spoke with solemn pride about the Navy's successful defensive action against an intruding American vessel. Online, nationalist commentators and state-sponsored trolls celebrated the attack as a moment of national rejuvenation, a righteous blow against perceived American hegemony. The imagery of the burning tanker was looped endlessly, a symbol of China's defiance. The attack was portrayed not as an unprovoked act of aggression, but as the inevitable consequence of American provocation. Beijing had drawn a line in the water, and it had been crossed, they argued. The PLA had simply done what was necessary to protect China's sovereign interests. Behind the public displays of nationalist fervor, however, the mood within the highest echelons of the Chinese Communist Party was likely more complex. The decision to launch such an audacious attack would not have been taken lightly. It represented a colossal gamble, a calculated risk that the United States, perceived as being overstretched and weary of conflict, would not have the political will to retaliate in a meaningful way. They wagered that Washington would protest diplomatically, perhaps impose some sanctions, but would ultimately swallow the loss to avoid a full-scale war. The strike was intended to be a shocking but limited action, designed to shatter American prestige and recalibrate the balance of power in a single fiery moment. This calculation, however, was born from a profound misunderstanding of the American psyche and its strategic doctrine. Beijing mistook American caution for weakness and its desire for stability as a lack of resolve. They believed they could control the ladder of escalation, delivering a sharp, painful blow without triggering a devastating response. The celebration in Beijing was, therefore, built on a foundation of wishful thinking. They had successfully demonstrated the lethality of their YJ-12 missiles and the competence of their naval forces. But in doing so, they had not just attacked a tanker, they had attacked the very concept of American deterrence. The fleeting moments of triumph in Beijing were the calm before a storm of their own making. In Washington, the news of the attack was received not with hesitation, but with cold, immediate fury. The unprovoked strike on a civilian vessel and the killing of American sailors was considered an unambiguous act of war. There was no debate, no hand-wringing. The time for diplomacy and strategic ambiguity was over. China had crossed a red line that had been clearly marked for decades. Within minutes of the confirmation from the USS Barry, the national security apparatus of the United States roared to life. At PACOM headquarters, a pre-existing and highly classified battle plan was activated. Just 7 minutes after the final missile impact, the order for immediate retaliation was given. The American response was designed to be swift, overwhelming, and devastatingly precise. It was not to be a symmetrical, tit-for-tat strike. Washington's goal was not merely to answer the attack, but to deliver a counterpunch so powerful it would fundamentally reset the strategic environment and re-establish American deterrence beyond any doubt. The plan involved a coordinated assault, using some of the most advanced and expensive assets in the US arsenal, a package of capabilities worth well over $500 million. The target was chosen with care: Woody Island, the most significant Chinese military fortress in the South China Sea. The first wave of the counterattack was electronic. 2 EA-18G Growler aircraft, the world's premier electronic warfare platforms, were scrambled from their base in Guam. These were not fighters, but electronic predators. Each aircraft, equipped with jamming pods costing $90 million apiece, raced towards the target area. Their mission was to create a massive bubble of electronic silence, to blind and deafen the sophisticated Chinese sensor and radar network on Woody Island and the surrounding seas. By jamming communications and disabling early warning systems across a 400-mile radius, the Growlers would effectively render the Chinese fortress deaf and blind, paving the way for the physical strike to follow. Simultaneously, the USS Barry, despite being in the immediate vicinity of the still-burning Liberty Sentinel, transitioned from a defensive to an offensive footing. Its crew, professional and focused even amidst the chaos, began preparing a salvo of their own. Below decks, 10 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles were readied for launch. Each missile, carrying a 1,000-pound high-explosive warhead, was programmed with precise coordinates for targets on Woody Island. The cost of this missile barrage alone would exceed $100 million. The battered but unbowed destroyer was about to demonstrate its own formidable striking power, proving that its purpose was not just to defend, but to project American power across vast distances. The centerpiece of the American retaliation was a display of overwhelming air power. As the Growlers began to weave their web of electronic disruption, 2 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, which had been redirected from a long-range mission, altered their course. These flying wings, each costing an astronomical $2.1 billion, are the pinnacle of American military technology, virtually invisible to enemy radar. They flew undetected through the South China Sea's contested airspace, approaching their target with an eerie silence. The Chinese forces on Woody Island, their screens filled with static and their communication lines dead, had no idea that judgment was descending upon them from the stratosphere. At 10:47, less than an hour after the attack on the Liberty Sentinel, the B-2s arrived over Woody Island. Their bomb bay doors opened to release their devastating cargo. 8 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 30,000 pounds, began their silent fall. These are the heaviest non-nuclear bombs in the American arsenal, designed to burrow deep underground before detonating, shattering even the most heavily fortified bunkers. The bombs struck their targets with pinpoint accuracy. The surface of the island erupted as a series of massive concussive explosions tore through hardened aircraft shelters, command and control centers, and underground ammunition depots. The very foundations of the Chinese fortress were pulverized. Woody Island was not just any outpost. It was the nerve center of China's military presence in the Paracel Islands. It housed advanced radar domes, batteries of HQ-9 long-range surface-to-air missiles, and a garrison of nearly 2,000 PLA personnel. Its 2,700-meter runway was a critical forward operating base for China's J-11 and J-16 fighter squadrons. The American attack was systematically designed to dismantle this capability. As the GBU-57s did their work, the 10 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from the USS Barry screamed in at low altitude. They struck their targets with surgical precision, cratering the long runway beyond repair and obliterating the military port facilities, ensuring no ship could dock and no aircraft could land or take off. The strategic objective of this overwhelming show of force was clear: to restore deterrence. The attack on the Liberty Sentinel was a challenge to America's credibility as a security guarantor in the Indo-Pacific. The swift and devastating obliteration of Woody Island was the emphatic answer. It demonstrated that the United States possessed not only the capability, but crucially, the political will to inflict unacceptable costs in response to aggression. The strike instantly altered the balance of power in the South China Sea, turning China's most powerful forward base into a smoking ruin in under an hour. It was a brutal but necessary lesson, sending an unmistakable message to Beijing and every other capital in the region. The events of the 23rd of September 2025 marked a permanent and dark turning point in the 21st century. In the space of a few hours, the simmering rivalry between the United States and China had boiled over into open, armed conflict. The attack on the Liberty Sentinel and the subsequent obliteration of Woody Island were more than just a military exchange. They were a shattering of the long-held assumption that economic interdependence would prevent war between the two giants. The price paid for this day of fire and fury was immense. For the United States, it was measured in the lives of 3 sailors, the horrific injuries of a dozen more, and the loss of a valuable tanker and its cargo. For China, the cost was a profound national humiliation. The swift and unstoppable nature of the American retaliation exposed the vulnerability of their prized anti-access area denial strategy. Their most formidable fortress in the South China Sea had been rendered impotent and destroyed with almost contemptuous ease. The triumphalist propaganda from earlier in the day evaporated, replaced by a stunned and furious silence from Beijing. The gamble had failed catastrophically. The leadership had not only failed to fracture American resolve, but had instead solidified it, inviting a devastating blow that set back their regional ambitions by years. The illusion of their impenetrable island chains had been exposed. The wider consequences rippled across the globe. The fragile peace that had underwritten global prosperity for decades was shown to be perilously thin. The attack sent shockwaves through global markets, and the specter of a wider conflict between 2 nuclear-armed powers cast a long shadow over international relations. Alliances were tested, and nations across the Indo-Pacífico were forced to reassess their security calculations in a new and far more dangerous world. The South China Sea was transformed overnight from a zone of competition into a potential flashpoint for a global conflagration, with naval patrols on both sides operating on a hair-trigger alert. In the end, the incident of the Liberty Sentinel stands as a grim monument to the dangers of miscalculation and hubris. While the American retaliation may have successfully re-established deterrence in the short term, it came at a terrible cost. The world became a less safe, more unpredictable place. The blood shed in the warm waters of the South China Sea served as a tragic reminder that in the high-stakes game of great power competition, the line between peace and war is terrifyingly fine. The calm of that September morning was gone, replaced by an uneasy and watchful quiet, pregnant with the possibility of a much larger storm yet to come.